Hey there, welcome. We are live inside the Radiantly Alive Woman, and we are doing a really exciting video today. We're talking about neck fusion scars. So I'm just have my laptop in front of me, making sure I have all my notes ready to roll. I always come prepared for these. So as you come into our live, just let me know you're here. Send me a hi, hashtag live, let me know you can hear sound, and all that is good to go. I am in a, as you probably noticed, again, different part of a home. I'm across the country right now, so it's really nice to be here and spend time with you, even though I'm just on a bit of a holiday. All right, I have my stuff in front of me. I can see me in case I miss any questions from you guys. Let's begin. Let's begin learning about neck fusion scars. So every one of these videos has these three different sections. We want to be really aware of not just the physical considerations, which are probably a lot more intuitive. We can kind of understand them a little bit more. We can see the connections more easily. There may be a lot of things that I bring up that you haven't really thought about, which is really important, which is why I'm here. I'm here to help you connect the dots and here to help you understand what it is that you're going through, because a lot of the things that you feel on the day-to-day, like symptomology that you feel, maybe you don't know why it's happening, or you've sought treatment and you haven't gotten lasting or complete results. I want to help you understand that your scars could be contributing to how you feel. And so these videos are all informational videos to help you understand that, get a good sense of it, but also start to understand your own body, your own mind, and see how everything kind of links together. This is really important when we are talking about a holistic perspective. The more we think big picture and see ourselves in this kind of holistic, integrative way, the better. We're more likely to progress. We're more likely to see greater results, and we're also a lot more likely to be gentle and compassionate towards ourselves, because we understand that we're in flux, we're a process, and that's really important when we're talking about a transformation as well. So what I wanted to actually just mention briefly before we could dive into neck fusion scars, I want to just share something that is really exciting that I mentioned, and I'm going to continue to mention because it's kind of rare. It's the first time I'm ever doing this. It's called a free 3-day retreat called Choose Your Scar. This is an opportunity for you to come on a live online retreat with me. We're doing these mini sessions 3 times a day on the weekend of August 6th to the 8th, and we're going to learn all about some of the concepts I've been talking about, but you're going to be able to apply all this stuff directly to you. It's really important to come on this retreat if you have a scar but you don't know how to begin, or you don't know how things are connected. It's really important for you to come on this retreat if you have multiple scars and you don't know where to begin. All of this, everything around this retreat is to bring you insight, to help see yourself in a different way, like I was just speaking about, so that you can start to see a forward path, like see a direction. That's really important to me, and that's one of the reasons why I created this community in the first place, is so that we no longer feel stuck, and then we start to have answers. Once we have those things starting to come together, we start to create a solid platform or foundation for us to start developing and growing and transforming and progressing and really helping ourselves thrive in body and in mind. Total well-being. I want us to think about the physical as well as the energetic and the emotional. This piece is so important when we're talking about scars, and it's one of the things that in the polls that I've been doing inside this group has been people are acknowledging that they didn't really see the links and they didn't understand the importance of scars from that perspective. So that's another reason why I do these videos, and you'll get a whole ton of that on this free 3-day retreat. So inside the Facebook group, you'll see an event section that brings you to the link to register. You need to register because you're going to receive a guidebook. You're going to receive a guidebook that at the end of the retreat, you're actually going to have a whole page, a series of pages, a multiple page guidebook that you can take with you for you to start beginning your transformation. You would have already started your transformation journey during the retreat, and it gives you a few more forward steps. If you really love it and you're like, I'm all in on this, I love it, I understand what you're talking about and it resonates with me a lot, you can come on an annual program called the Enliven program. This again is the first time I've ever done a group program. This is the least expensive it will ever be, and probably the most exciting. It's the pilot program. We're all coming on this together for the first time. So there's only room for 25 women. People have started to ask me a lot of questions. I've had women already registering. So if you have any interest in taking all of this with you on an annual kind of basis, where you start to integrate these things very deeply into your life and starting to really transform your physical, emotional, and energetic health, then please join us for Enliven. So I'm going to pop in both of these links. All right. Hey, Simone, I can see you here. See, it's so weird. I can't see you messaging me at all on my phone, but I can see you on my laptop, which is why I'm so glad that I have my laptop here. I don't know why that happens sometimes. So I've just dropped in the link to register for the Choose Your Scar. And then, like I said, if you're just all in on this, you're like, Kendra, I get it, it resonates, I feel it, it's making sense, I want more, then you can come on this annual program. Women have already started to register, and there's the link right there as well. So yeah, Simone, hey, first of all, how's it going? Simone brings up a really great point, and this is just like music to my ears. When I give a bit of education, a bit of wisdom to a woman, they just start running with it, and it is so amazing to see, because these insights and these like aha moments start coming, and then you really start to feel like you're in control of yourself. You're starting to build a relationship with your body from a different perspective, maybe one that, you know, wasn't the best relationship, and as you start to turn the whatever into more of a curiosity, then you can really start to make sense of what's going on. And then once you know what's going on, then you can start to work it, then you can change it. You can't transform anything if you have no idea what's going on. Then you're just still in the dark, which is what is going on across the board. Many women, people are stuck and they don't know where to begin. And this is a beautiful place to begin, because you enter into the physical benefits of scar work as well as the emotion and the energy. Emotion and energy is kind of a hard thing to get at. It's hard to really find a way and to start transforming these things. Some of these things we've been carrying with us for decades and decades. So scar work helps to like literally start to move those things, and you start to experience change on a very deep level. So yeah, Simone was saying she was stretching earlier and feeling one of her scars, and it's funny that I now feel like I can feel how it goes inwards to the bone. Perfect. That is like, oh, cha-ching. It is true, it's happening, and once you feel it in yourself, you can't unfeel it. So powerful. So that is something I say, that is the truth. I've felt it in hundreds and hundreds of bodies and women. Scars are always looking for stable anchor points. The most stable thing that you have in your body that's not going anywhere for a very long time is your bones. Bones are solid, so they'll be checking those out and trying to latch onto them. So this is a really important little piece here. While we get into neck fusions, let's start talking about neck fusion. So neck fusion is an interesting thing, because the fusion is actually going on in the back. So I got wet hair today. I went into the lake to do a swim. So neck fusion, they were actually trying to fuse levels of our vertebrae, which are at the back of the neck, but the entry point for neck fusion is through the front. Now, to Simone's point, and what I talk about very often, is when you're going, the scarring is going through the whole neck to the back. So it's not just the incisions that you see at your neck, wherever they are. Usually they're kind of like in the front here. Depending on when you had your surgery and what country you live in, they may look slightly different. But the actual incision is somewhat small, but it's going all the way towards the vertebrae. They're doing that because it's a less risky direction. In that whole spinal column, vertebrae area, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of connective tissue. There's a lot of really important nerves that supply function, in this case your neck, to your breathing, to your arms, to a lot of important things. So the safest way is to go through the neck. But when we're the front of the neck. When we're talking about scars, what I want you to think about as a physical consideration is beyond, I say this every time, but specifically here, beyond just what you see incision-wise, it's going all the way through. And it's also having to, like, you know, push stuff around to get to it. Because the body is very perfectly kind of tightly compacted. There's not a lot of wiggle room. There's not a lot of like space just for extra things to go in. So they're really having to move things around when they're trying to get to the back. So I want you to think about that again with scar tissue. They're moving through your food tube, your esophagus, your air tube going down into your lungs, your voice box. I'm using just common lingo so we're just all on the same page. This is all here, as well as your thyroid as an organ. And then obviously, so the head is an incredibly vascular area. It has a ton of circulatory vessels, as well as lymphatic vessels, a lot of things that have to do with artery, vein, and your immune system. If you've ever been to Body Worlds, it's the show that they do across I don't know if they do it anymore, but they used to do it across the world, and these people had given their bodies to science, and they have taken these bodies and put them in really educational shapes and like peeled away certain layers. And I'll never forget it. There's this one piece where it's a bust of someone, and they removed everything except for the vascular layer, and they've put like a red dye in it to show you that it's the blood vascular area, and like you almost can't see like from one side to the other. Like it's so vascular here. Anyone who's cut their forehead really badly or watched like collision sports like rugby, you'll know that the head bleeds a lot. It's a very vascular area. So when we're kind of crossing this like through the neck, it's kind of in some ways a little bit of it's a danger zone, because you are passing some incredibly valuable real estate here that you want to think about. So I want you to keep that in front and center when you're thinking physical. Now we're going to get to, actually let me just talk about one more point on that as I look on my notes. So, and then we'll go into these two different principles. So I talk about two really specific principles that relate to every single scar in the body. I have them in my online course called Scars Matter. But first, let's just talk about the fusion itself. So the fusion happens most likely because of like years and years of degeneration. So the discs have kind of degenerated. You've had a lot of like grinding or wear and tear on the vertebrae themselves, and that grinding is creating a lot of pain and discomfort. And over time, that pain and discomfort can get to a point where it's so unbearable that the solution is to fuse two vertebrae together or more, depending on what's happened. So it's really something that's been going on for years and years, decades at a time, and then the only kind of solution there is to fuse many levels together. It could be more of an acute situation. This does happen. So something happens like a car accident, something with a lot of high velocity, equestrian, any kind of motor vehicle that goes really quickly, and maybe you needed to get some sort of fusion because of that, because of what had happened. Fusions are not just like squeezing something together and not just flattening two vertebrae together. They actually need to leave a really important amount of space so that the nerve on either side has enough space to exit the spinal cord and go to the correct area, somewhere in this kind of like torso, upper limb area is its like direction that it's traveling to. So why I'm talking about that is because when we have a lumbar fusion, obviously, so there's an immediate lack of movement. When there's a lack of movement, we're going to come to this really important principle, which means that when there's something underworking or under moving, there will always be a reciprocal kind of relationship where something will be overworking or overmoving. But if we just pause on that principle for a second and we come into the idea of lack of movement, we'll also increase stuff like stagnation. It will create lots of places in this area, like head and face, where there'll be less movement of fluid. More stagnation, like more, think about stagnation in the terms of fluid, like arteries, nerves, lymph, all that stuff. Think about it as like a pond, like a pond that's very still. It just like builds and builds and like holds all the fluid, but it doesn't really have anywhere to go. Why does that happen with a fusion? Because joints are supposed to move through their full range of motion, and usually that happens because the muscles that are there will call on the full movement. And if there's no movement in the joint, then you're not getting this natural pumping action that should be happening from all of that articulation, from the knock-on effect of muscles acting like elastics that will create joints moving in and out of their range of motion, which creates a natural pump of fluid in particular, but of a lot of different things. So it creates high levels of stagnation in these fluids, like kind of like a boggy effect. So physically what you could be feeling with neck fusions, cervical fusions, is any kind of tension, like chronic tension in the neck, shoulders, in the face, jaw, anywhere in the head really. And then we'll come to something that's really cool called the Lovett reactors, where stuff that's going on in your neck could be mirrored in going on. You could be having something going on in your low back, your lumbar spine, or your abdomen because of that. So the over-under principle that I just briefly touched on, let's go into that. This is a principle across the board. It applies to many things in life. So what this is when there's something under-moving, like I said, or underperforming, something else has to pick up the slack. It has to overperform, overmove, and therefore we get this kind of imbalance going on. So if we talk about vertebrae just needing to move with simple range of motion, like just turning your head and looking at your children, or looking at your blind spot, or just looking down at your feet when you tie your shoes, or looking up at the cupboard or the sky, your neck is requiring to move, and you have 7 vertebrae that should be all just assisting that movement. So it's really smooth, and every 7 does its part. Every vertebrae does its part, and then there's not areas that are over moving because all 7 cervical vertebrae do their thing. Now when you have a neck fusion, a cervical fusion, there's no longer 7 vertebrae that can do their thing. It's more like at least 1, 2, 3, and maybe 2 on the bottom, because there's always going to be 2 vertebrae that are fused together. Sometimes there's 3 or more. So there'll be, obviously so, under-moving vertebrae because they're fused together with metal, and then therefore there'll be over-moving segments. So what's really common in a neck fusion is you'll have, it will just kind of keep going. There'll be more irritation in joints above and below because those above and below have to pick up the slack, which is, over time, creates a lot of pain and discomfort again. So the over-under moving principle is really important to think about, and I'm going to go touch on the Lovett reactors. So I'm going to pull up a picture here. I'm actually going to pull it up in my window right now, so I just have a reminder to do that. Whatever's going on in the neck will be paired in the lumbar spine, the low back. If you look at an anatomy picture, and I'll pop one into the group as well so you see it, you'll see that the curve in the neck is exactly like the curve in the lumbar spine. They're mirrored. They're doing the same kind of like C-like shape. Okay, and then where the thoracic spine is, where the rib cage is doing the opposite. It's doing like a complementary curve. So you end up having the neck doing the same thing as the lumbar spine, as the low back, and then the thoracic spine, the rib cage, is doing the opposite. So what's going on here could be very well going on here. When you have stuff in the neck, like chronic tightness, pain, sharpness, it could over time happen here as well, because in a lot of ways the neck is very, very similar to the low back and to the abdomen. These muscles will start crossing many joints and kind of seatbelting us in for stability and control. The neck has a lot of range, and the head is generally quite heavy. The lumbar spine and the abdomen, again, has a lot of range and opportunity, but it's sandwiched in between the rib cage, the thoracic spine, and the pelvis, and then the legs. So the neck has tons of opportunity, and that's why it's usually a common space for wear and tear. So I want you to also keep that as a thought, as a consideration when you're thinking about what's going on in your neck. If you have a lumbar fusion, what's going on in your low back? It's really common for people to have stuff going on in their low back. All right, so I briefly spoke about what muscles do. This is a really long conversation, and it is something that I talk about with my clients in the group format, the Enliven program, or my one-to-one women who do the Radiantly Alive program. But in general, what I want to talk about is the problem of centration. So if you have a scar that crosses a joint, and in this case a lumbar fusion, it's crossing many joints, probably many vertebrae will have the scar tissue cross it, this becomes a centration problem. So if the two vertebrae are like stacked on top of each other, and you have scar tissue yanking it in one direction, getting it all stuck and jammy, then your vertebrae will no longer be centrated, meaning like sitting nicely centered on each other. They'll be pulled forward. I'm showing you in a really large way so that it's like over exaggerated and you can see it. It's not going to be like this because your spinal cord would be in big trouble if it was. But just I want you to see that they'll get pulled off of their center, and then you'll be moving from that like decentralized position. And then you won't have the muscle function and activation because of the lumbar fusion to pull it back onto center. So we need to kind of make that happen. We need to try to work to get centration back as best possible. So that's another thing I want you to think about. Really think about the muscles, like I was talking about the fluids, so a lot of swelling, a lot of sinus, a lot of congestion, allergy stuff. All of this is fair game in here, but don't forget it also is paired in here. So you could have things like indigestion. Acid reflux is really common. Problems with your bladder, your bowels, food intolerances, all of these sorts of things are really quite common. And then anything going on, obviously so, with your shoulder blades. So lots of like tight knots that just won't quit in between or around the shoulder blades is again a very common thing. So I think that's what I want to say with the physical. There's a lot there, like I said, but that's a good place to start, to just thinking about your symptoms. That's the most important thing, to think about your symptoms as it relates to this conversation about the neck fusion scars. Now let's go into our second piece. I'm just going to move myself here to make sure I can continue to see everyone. Sometimes, like I said, it just doesn't show me the comments. All right, we're still up to date. Okay, so the emotional and energetic considerations. These are, like I said at the beginning, probably not on your radar. And once we start having this conversation, maybe or hopefully the dots will start getting connected of like, oh yeah, that does actually make a lot of sense. So we spoke about stagnation being a big problem, like fluid holding in the area, not really circulating, not really moving very well, that bog-like still pond. I want you to take that same kind of idea, that same visual of the pond, and apply it to like your energy and your mood. A feeling of actual stagnation or stuckness, a feeling of holding, or like you're kind of working through molasses, everything's very thick and bog-like. In like your energy, feeling like heavy, feeling like you're really having to work very hard to do things. And maybe that's also an emotional sense. So it's really hard to work through some of your emotions. There's just a lot of heaviness there, feeling like you can't quite get through it all. That's a really common thing that I see with neck fusion scar. The other thing that I want to talk about is just the throat in general. The throat, obviously, so like we had mentioned at the beginning, is the area for your voice box, how you're actually speaking. And don't just think about it in the physical sense. I want you to think about it in this kind of energetic way where this is how you communicate. This is how you show up. This is your voice. This is how you speak your needs. This is how you, actively take responsibility for yourself. Speak up for when things are not how you want them, learning to say no. All of this kind of communication center may be impeded or damaged since the surgery. Not that it can't be changed, because as you know, I'm a huge advocate of, we're talking about scars as having all these impacts, but on the flip of that, working through the scar, through my system that I've created, Scars Reigniting Your System, Reigniting Your Feminine, this is all about working through that so that you can transform all of this kind of stuckness that's going on in a physical sense as well as an energetic and emotional sense, so that you can really reach your full potential. So you can really work through those things. Some of life's biggest struggles are held within scar tissue. So think about Those two things. Think about your throat. Think about your voice. How are you communicating? What's different since your surgery, or maybe it had been going on for a long time? Do you find it really hard to speak, to communicate, to communicate clearly, but also speak from your heart, or speak up about what you need? Then the other piece that I want you to just think about is, obviously this is where our mind is, this is where our head is. We, especially in like the West, we think about our mind being part of our brain. Or our mind is our brain. In the West, that is a very common kind of thought process. In Eastern traditions and philosophies, it's not necessarily like that direct link. We don't think that our mind is just located inside of our brain. It's a bit more complicated than that. But if you just think about your mind as being generally in your head, like we are kind of conditioned to feel and to know, and then our heart also, across the board, Western and Eastern, will all kind of agree that the heart center is here in the center of the chest. The physical heart is obviously off to the left slightly, but here we are talking about emotion and energy. I want you to think about these things as being ideally connected on a track. When you are connected, your mind to your heart and your heart to your mind, there's a way that you can express yourself, that you can tap into those really important virtuous like qualities, like feeling compassion, feeling gratitude, joy, love, all the stuff that can be expressed through the heart. You want to have these two things kind of lined up in a highway that communicates with each other, so that you can have the thoughts and express them through your voice. And if this highway is kind of disconnected or damaged because of all the scar tissue that's really like leaching through it to find the incision site, but also kind of find all through the vertebrae there, I want you to think about that as an interesting kind of concept, this disconnected, the highway between the mind and the heart. Then what we talk about every single time with emotion and energy, I always say that it's great and important to start at the physical, because we get it. It's right there in front of us, and those dots can be connected quite easily. But when we move into the emotion and the energy of stuff, it can feel kind of abstract and feel like a little bit harder to grasp or harder to get to, especially so if we are disconnected from our heart or we're not able to communicate really clearly. So what I want us to just be really aware of is that there's a path, there's like a framework that we can follow to really trace ourselves back into something that's really meaningful and important to us. And that's to look at the emotion, the energy in these three different phases. So I want you to think about the before the surgery itself, the neck fusion, the during the surgery itself, and then the after. So let's just break down these phases for quite a while, because this is most likely, not always, but most likely a degenerative thing that happened that ended up becoming a neck fusion. This before phase could be quite long. So what is the general feeling in that phase? It could be decades, but I want you to think about in relation to your symptoms and what that did to your life, the heaviness, the stagnation, the like fluid retention, feeling like things are chronically tight, a lot of pain maybe, the voice communication center, all of these things, the inner dialogue that was going on in your internal mood, feeling, vibe before the surgery itself. Pick up on that and gather as much as you can about that. And then you're going to move to the during. The during the surgery is like the smallest phase, especially in this example, but it is packed with a lot of fear. Always packed and jammed with a lot of fear, as well as a bunch of other different things depending on your situation. I always talk about that will most likely be present, as well as probably many more things. Relationship dynamics between you and people that you're close with, people who are bringing you to the hospital, making sure that you're safe, spouses, family, loved ones, all that kind of, dynamic duo or triangles. Think about that and the feeling, the vibe, the energy, the mood. What were you thinking? Do you feel like something wasn't done? All of that stuff, pick that up and grab that. Then the other common thing that people say about the during is hospital staff, dynamics between you and hospital staff. Even if the hospital staff had the greatest intention to give you the greatest care and treat you with the most respect, that they really wanted to serve and help you, maybe it didn't come off like that because you were in a really freaked out mood. Maybe something didn't go to plan. All of these things need to be considered in the during. Then you need to go into the after, and depending on when your scar was, this could be a very long time. So the after phase is anything from the healing of the scar itself, which is quite an intense surgery for this area. You may have differences in your voice, maybe really hard to eat or drink for a period of time. Very challenging to start like re-engaging all these muscles and keeping your head on straight. It's really overwhelming when we go through these healing phases of surgery. So it's absolutely all of that, as well as anything between then and now, really. And it's, again, the inner dialogue that you felt. Like, what are you now feeling on the inside about yourself because of the surgery? Do you wear different clothing? Have you changed your lifestyle? All of these things matter. These are like the external kind of surface things, but you may feel like deep layers of resentment, of sadness, of sorrow, of grief, of anger. There's a variety of different things, and every woman is different, and it's really important that you find out what it is for you, because the more clear you are about this phase, about the emotional energetic phase, the better everything is. The more clear you are, like I said, the more information you have, the more you really have that foundation to rest on. So that is the kind of final piece that I want to bring up about the emotion and the energy. And then let's get into the good stuff here. Let's do the what to do. So I want to make sure we're still good. We are still good. Okay, so the what to do. This first thing, I actually give you two things in the what to do phase. The first thing, you do it for every single scar. I tell it to you every single time because it's so important that you don't skip over this. Particularly with this surgery, this is not a minor surgery. Lots of things could have gone wrong. There's very long healing involved. It was a very kind of long period of build-up before the surgery, and we want to really be considerate of that. There's a lot of emotion packed in there. There's a lot of your life packed in there. There's potentially a lot of physical symptoms that you're feeling on a day-to-day. So how do we really, take all of that in and get a good framework for where we're starting from? You're going to apply this 3-part practice. This 3-part practice should be done with every single scar. And the first part is you're kind of relaxing into part. You need to find a place in your house or wherever that you're comfortable, where you can hang out for a little bit, 10, maybe 20 minutes, and close your eyes in a laying or seated position with hand to skin contact on the scarring. Maybe you need one hand, maybe you need two, wherever you want to put your hands, but you do need to go skin to skin. Once you've done all those, you can go into the second phase. The second phase is gathering as much physical information as you can. The physical information could be a range of stuff. So it could be temperature, hot, cold, sensitivity level, dull, numb, or hypersensitive, nauseous, panic, fear. What is going on when you're actually touching the scar from that perspective, as well as the other physical things are the obvious places of tension, puckering, pulling, tightness. If you're just like touching your skin and it feels like it's stuck, like Simone was saying at the beginning, that is all stuff that you want to be aware of and acknowledge, because we don't want it to be stuck at all. It means that there's something that needs to be worked. All scars will have this to a small or a lesser degree. So we want to pay attention to that. And then the third part here is the emotional and energetic, which we just touched on. I want you to go into all the stuff that I mentioned, as well as just paying attention to those 3 phases: the before, the during, and the after. Really gathering all that in. This section, this phase, this last one here may take a little bit longer because it may be something you're not used to, doesn't feel very natural. That's okay. Nothing feels natural when you do it for the first time. Just stick with it, and maybe it's something you need to revisit a few times in a row, and just keep at it until you get as clear a picture as you can about the physical considerations and the emotional and the energetic. Then, what do we want to do as a what to do for this scar, for our cervical, our neck fusion scars? What I absolutely do not advise is first touching the scar at all. So be careful, don't start pushing around on the scar. You need to really be mindful about this area because it can be a very sensitive area. The other thing I definitely don't want you to be doing is I don't want you to be starting to do these range of motion exercises, because like I just discussed in the physical section, when we have an over-under problem, which we will absolutely have every single time we have a fusion injury, we don't necessarily want to be just start cranking around where we think we should have range or so on and so forth. We want to work a little bit smarter, especially, like I said, for all fusions. So don't do either of those things, but what I do want us to do, and what will greatly improve the movement here, is actually finding quality movement in your lumbar spine, in your low back. So what can you do that I can easily explain that will help your neck in a really, really impressive way? Is I want you to improve the quality of movement that you have at your low back. It's very likely that you have discomfort, chronic pain, pinching, tweak-like feelings in the low back. So we want to get this area moving really well, because the whole body, like so much of our mass, especially how we center our weight, our like distribution of our mass, like really rests and sits in our pelvis. So if we can get this kind of platform, this structure working really well, then that feeds up the chain really well and really benefits the neck. It will also help all the tension that you probably feel anywhere in here: shoulders, shoulder blades, chest, neck, jaw, face, all that stuff. So the thing that I want you to do that I can just discuss really simply with you here, there's a lot more detail and a lot more stuff that I go into with my clients, but I want you to work on doing a cat-cow where you're only focused on the quality of movement at your low back. So typically, we all know what cat-cow is. I think it's a yoga posture that you'd see in like a studio or modern yoga class. It's probably something that you've done. We don't just do it in yoga now, we do it as warm-ups for strength routines and Pilates and the whole shebang. So it's on your hands and on your knees. And usually we make these like really big flexion, like full spinal flexion. We call it like triple flexion. Flex your lumbar spine, flex your thoracic spine, flex your cervical spine. And then these big extensions, 3 triple extension. I don't want you to do any of that. I actually want you to do these really nice, precise movements just at the low back into flexion and extension. So instead of making the cat-cow into like a tip to tail kind of movement, I want you to create that same style, a big extension and a big flexion, but in a refined way, just in the lumbar spine, just in the low back. And there's 5 segments in the low back, there's 7 in the neck. I want you to feel like you're tapping into or tuning into all 5 of those segments, meaning you're not letting 1 or 2 segments do all the movement, like a hinge. We don't want to have like a door hinge thing going on anywhere in our body. We want everything to be doing its part so the work gets equally divided. But this will help to really, like I said, relieve some of the symptomology that you're probably feeling basically from your rib cage up into your arms. So if you have any questions about how to do that, please let me know. I'd be happy to answer more questions. It's always easier for me to go at it with clients in a one-to-one, but hopefully this will give you a really good kickstart into what you can do. It's really impactful. If you stick with it for a few weeks, you will start to feel the benefit in your neck, and I'd love to know how that goes for you. So if anyone has any questions, please let me know. I'd love to hear them. I'll just stay here for a moment if anyone wants to type anything in briefly. And then, like I said, if this interests you, if you're super curious, please come and join our free 3-day retreat, Choose Your Scar. We're talking about scars, lining that up with your symptomology, making sense of that through your own personal timeline, giving you an ability to choose your own growth markers so you know how to monitor your own change, and giving you we'll start to decide, you will make the choice of which scar impacts your body the most, which is huge. This is something I do with my clients over a number of sessions, and we're gonna get clear on that in this 3-day retreat, which will also include 3 different types of practices. So we're gonna do them together, which is really great. So you'll have access to that, which is super cool. All right, I do not see any questions coming up. So I'll just say thank you for being here. It was great to have you. I go live twice a week inside this group. If you know a woman who would benefit from this information, please invite them in here. It's so useful to have women in here so that they can ask questions, receive this information, and enjoy this supportive community. So Again, thank you very much and have a lovely weekend, and I will see you soon. Bye.